Well, folks, again, we have a wonderful interview lined up with Mr. Don Chaney. We know who he is, from rebounds to getting back to defense to offense to points to all of those things, assist and block shots. But now he no longer does that. But one thing he's doing is making sure he's blocking ATTRCM. Is that the best way to say it, Dr.
That's
Chaney?
You got it perfectly. Yes.
Y'all, he's a figurehead, staplehead. We know what he has accomplished professionally, but there's now another defender and another 2-2-1 and a 1-2-2 press zone that he's dealing with now in life, y'all. And I know he's ready to talk to us about something that amyloidosis, a lot of people have it, especially in the communities of the African descent and the Caribbean. And he is one of those individuals that has given us the opportunity to share his story, to share the struggle and his success about dealing with the ATTRCM. We welcome again to the show, Mr. Don Chaney. How are you doing this afternoon, sir?
Well, I'm doing fine. It's good to be here. I'm enjoying my grandkids and trying to enjoy this hot weather down here.
Listen, the weather is hot. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
where you are and where you go. We're so grateful. We're grateful for Pfizer for making this happen again. Don Chaney, this ATTRCM, I want to get into it because people need to know exactly what we're dealing with here. And a lot of people don't know. What I've learned, even after one of our previous discussions, that there's still a community of people, whether it be of the African descent or the European descent, that still don't have a clue as to what ATTRCM.
Yeah.
So could you just brief us on what that is?
Sure. ATTRCM is a serious, under-recognized, and underdiagnosed type of rare disease amyloidosis that affects the heart and associated with heart failure. There are actually two subtypes of ATTRCM, the wild type and hereditary type. And the hereditary ATTRCM occurs due to a genetic mutation that is passed down through a relative. The most common gene mutation associated with hereditary ATTRCM in the US, V122I, is found almost exclusively in African Americans. And approximately 3 to 4% of African Americans are thought to have the V122I mutation, although not all individuals with V122I mutation develop symptoms of hereditary ATTRCM. And despite African Americans and Black community members experiencing higher rates of heart disease than any other racial or ethnic group in the U.S., heart failure caused by ATTRCM is often underdiagnosed in this population. ATTRCM get worse over time, so a correct early diagnosis of ATTRCM is important so that patients and their doctors can work together to develop an appropriate management plan.
Thank you, Dr. Chaney, about these acronyms, V121 and ATTRCM. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people sometimes get lost in the shuffle of how we identify this particular disease. Now, in your personal journey, when were you diagnosed, before we get into some other questions? And what is it like living with the diagnosis?
Well, I had heard of ATTRCM before. I never heard, I should say, I never heard of it before. I'd heard of amyloidosis, but I didn't know anything about it. But basically, I never heard of it before my diagnosis in 2019. And it really caught me off guard when I was diagnosed. I was shocked. And I had been experiencing the symptoms, frequent heart-related symptoms for a few years. I had fatigue, palpitations, shortness of breath, and I was prescribed medication to help manage my palpitation, but it only made me feel worse. And looking back for about maybe 10 years, I had also suffered from carpal tunnel syndrome, which is numbness and tingling and pain in the fingers, knee pain, and swelling in my ankles and lower legs. But I assumed these were all caused by my years of playing professional basketball. And like many people, and even some doctors, I was completely unfamiliar with ATTRCM and didn't know the signs or symptoms. So I didn't think to share them with my doctor or my cardiologist. When those of who I had been seeing over the years. So I basically just didn't associate the two. And once I was diagnosed with ATTRCM, my doctor and I decided on a management plan. And later, after genetic testing and counseling, confirmed that I had hereditary type ATTRCM.
Thank you for that. Now you talked about you have the hereditary type.
Yes.
Is it has it been identified? Did it come from the patriarch man side or the matriarch, your mother's side of the family? Or can
Well,
doctors
yeah,
determine
I'm
that?
sorry. Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have sort of done my own investigation and found out that it basically came from my mother's side because my mom and my grandmother both passed away from heart disease. And I can remember as a young kid, my mom and both my mom and grandmother complaining about carpal tunnel syndrome, swelling in the legs, knee pain, and all those things associated with the hereditary type. So looking back, over the years and just doing my research, I really decided that and came to the conclusion that basically I got it from my parents' side, my mom's side. Mhm.
Thank you for sharing. Now, of course, now that you are one of those individuals who are successfully winning the battle with ATTRCM, uh, why did you become involved with Pfizer's Voices for the Heart initiative?
Well, after my unexpected diagnosis, and I was like, as I mentioned, I was totally shocked, when I was diagnosed, and my journey to getting there because it actually took me maybe 5 to 6 doctors I had to visit before I got the correct diagnosis. And I made it my mission to share my story with others because I know if I had gone through these things, they're also going through the same problems trying to get the correct diagnosis. So, I just made it my mission to share my story with others by raising awareness and helping others recognize the signs and symptoms of ATTRCM, with the hopes of early diagnosis. And, African Americans, Afro Caribbean, and black community members, especially those who have been diagnosed with heart failure, but have no unresolved symptoms, and also their family members. It's imperative that they really get the information, find out more about it, so they can get out there and see the right doctor and get the diagnosis. And you can attend this particular event that's coming up. You can attend it virtually by registering at yourheartsmessage.com/Dawn. And let me do that again. Your Heart's Message with Dawn, yourheartmessage.com with Dawn. Okay, and you can attend that virtually to get all kind of information on the event coming up and about the disease itself.
Thank you, sir. Now, you went to the doctor. You just, injuries,
Hmm.
basketball. You jumped
Yes.
and dunked and slammed, and so I mean, you were just going for just a normal
Yeah,
swelling carpal tunnel, nothing major.
exactly.
What when you had that first initial talk with the doctor? He said, "Hey, doc, I see something else." What were you thinking? Because you hadn't heard of ATTRCM at the point
No,
at the and I haven't.
no,
Like I'm just not hearing
no.
about it. So, like I said, you thinking it's just carpal tunnel. You thinking it's an old basketball
Yeah,
injury, wearing your knees
exactly.
out. But you sit down with that doctor. So, could you just give us a glimpse of what that was like for the first time?
Well, it's really interesting, and it comes in stages because for me, especially, I can complain to my wife about my aches and pains, my swelling knees, swelling ankles, and how I'm feeling. But when I get to the doctor, I get amnesia. And I think that happens with a lot of African American men, especially when they get in front of a doctor. They don't come out and have a heart to heart with this particular doctor or a cardiologist they're seeing. And that's the most important thing. Let him know every little symptom you're having. He has to know to get the correct diagnosis. For me, I sort of briefly say, "Well, doctor, I have this," but my wife comes in, which is why you have to have a caregiver or a friend to go with you with her pad and pencil, and she jots down everything that I've been complaining about. And really, it helped the doctor get to a correct diagnosis. And once I actually gave him the information, and he started noticing the carpal tunnel syndrome, the swelling of the knees, the fatigue aspect. Then he was able to really come up with the correct diagnosis.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chaney. And we want to circle back yourheartsmessage.com /
That's right.
Don. That, that will, when is that event going to take place?
All right, that it's going to be Saturday, August 27th, and it's hosted by Pfizer, and it's you can attend it virtually by registering, as I mentioned earlier, at yourheartsmessage.com / Don. And the host speaker, cardiologist Dr. Don Rowe, I think you know him, will be there, and he's with the Reach and Teach one. So it should be very interesting and very informative. And I think those people, if you can attend that, you can get a lot of information, and you can also sort of narrow down what your symptoms are and explain those things when you go to visit your next cardiologist or doctor's appointment.
Hey, thank you, sir. Moving on, and I'm appreciative of your time. I thank you for sharing your story. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's heartwarming, and then it makes me more open as an African American
Mhm.
male to take my heart more seriously.
Yes.
Uh, like you said, we think some of the things are just injuries, and they can be,
Right.
but it could be some other underlying conditions and
Eh,
issues there.
Yeah,
So,
not to
go ahead.
cut you off, but that this is one reason why it's greatly under recognized and underdiagnosed, because this particular disease mimics a heart disease. So they fall in line until you start looking at all the symptoms like carpal tunnel syndrome, swelling ankles, knee pain, and fatigue and things like that. Then you can narrow it down to get the diagnosis of ATTRCM.
You mentioned, and thank you. You mentioned about you opening it up. I mean, you opening up with your
Hmm.
doctor. Like, what
Hmm.
what brought you to that point where you said, "Okay, doc, I need to," you had to get over that barrier of
Yeah, yeah.
I can't listen. I can't be the big dog right now. I
Well,
gotta tell you some other. I gotta share some other things because, like you said, when we sit in those offices and we
sure.
getting picked on and punched and
Yes.
pringed and this and that. It's like, man, okay, that's enough. I'm ready to go. So what made you open up? What brought you to that place where you could say,
Well,
I'm ready to
a-
open up and talk?
yeah, yeah. That's a very good question, because, as I mentioned, um, you have these symptoms, and you complain about your heart, you complain about fatigue, you complain about palpitations. So you see one doctor, and I was put on medication, but it really made my situation worse. Actually, I was put on medication for the palpitations, and I didn't get any better. So I had unresolved issues there. I didn't get the answers that I want. So I went to another doctor, and basically heard the same thing. So I went through actually five doctors, and when I got to the sixth cardiologist, then he started narrowing down all of my symptoms, and then I began to find out exactly what I had, and I was able to manage my condition. So that's when I found out I actually had ATTRCM. But I know a lot of people out there are going to doctors and they have all these unresolved answers and issues, and the doctor himself, because there are a lot of doctors who are not very familiar with this disease, and they're definitely not familiar with how it affects African Americans in a disproportionate sense. So, they're not looking for ATTRCM. They're looking for maybe just regular heart condition, cholesterol, high blood pressure, and things like that. So that's why it's very important to make sure you keep going to doctors, make sure you let them know all your symptoms and signs so that you can get the correct diagnosis so you can start your treatment, your management earlier. Mhm.
Doc, a few more questions. One of the questions is, how does this hereditary ATTRCM uniquely impact the communities in which we serve and come from?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand that this particular disease, it affects African Americans, Afro Caribbean, the communities in a totally disproportionate way. 3 to 4% are affected by that the V122I mutation, and I think it's very important for our community members to understand that This is a disease that's happening that not very familiar, totally underdiagnosed, and you have to really explain to your doctor your symptoms, your signs and symptoms, so that you can get the correct diagnosis. Because, as I mentioned, there are a lot of doctors out there who would treat you for just regular heart condition and not know that it's ATTRCM.
Thank you. And that leads us into our next question. Uh, the misdiagnosis is so easily
Yes.
misdiagnosed by
Mm-hmm.
cardiologists.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so talk to us about that. Maybe I know you're not the doctor on that particular sense, but how
Yeah.
we are misdiagnosing this cardiovascular disease.
Yeah, well, once you go in, and if your doctor is not that familiar with the disease, and they put you through the routine and the different tests, and they will leave there if they're not very familiar with ATTRCM. They will put you in the category of having maybe a high blood pressure problem. Uh, uh, um, you may have just regular cholesterol problems, and they associate that with regular heart disease. That's why I mentioned earlier that this particular disease mimics, to a degree, a regular heart condition until you start thinking about carpal tunnel syndrome, fatigue, swelling of the joints, the lower legs, knee pain. And then when you start putting those things together and all those factors together, and that's why it's important to let your doctor know all the things that's happening to you so that he can come to a correct diagnosis and then start managing your condition.
And that's good. And like you said, a doctor, this is, I barely knew to some
Hmm.
cardiologists at the community, and then
Right.
studying the disease amongst the African American, Afro Caribbean uh, community. So I'm grateful for having a greater understanding of why it's misdiagnosed, because
Yes.
you saying, man, 45, 50 suffers from a lot of carpal tunnel. He can say, well, I worked a lot in
Yeah.
factories,
Well,
you know.
I'm one of those guys. I'm one of those guys. I had injuries where I had been undercut, and you know basketball. Guy undercut me. I fell on my arms and wrist, and I was out for about 3 weeks. With wrist injuries, and I just assumed those were from the fall of my injury, not knowing that when I developed the same situation in the other hand, other wrist, and I said, well, that's kind of weird that both wrists start bothering me. But those are the little things like that. That's why you have to do your research. And if you're not getting the correct answers that you want, and you're still having unresolved symptoms, you have to continue to, because what happened. And my family's guilty of this. We have our favorite physician, our favorite cardiologist, guy we love. We trust him, and we just go from there. Whatever he says is the truth. Well, if your symptoms are still there and your issues are not resolved, well, it's time to move on and try someone else. And that's the dilemma I think African Americans especially go through. We've had a doctor for years, and my mom especially, she trusted this guy no matter what. Well, if you're still having these problems, maybe it's time to see and visit another physician or another cardiologist.
You're so right. We, as my grandmother used to say, let's ride it till the wheels fall
Yes,
off.
yes.
And yeah,
I've heard that term.
right, right, ride it till the wheels fall off. So
Yeah.
now moving to the last two questions. We're about to wrap it up because we know
Okay.
you got some other things pressing, and enjoy those grandbabies. You now are a father and now grandfather.
Hmm.
How are you sharing this information with your
Yeah.
children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews abroad?
Yeah.
And why is it so important? Because, hey, this is Uncle Don or Granddad Don.
Yeah. It's very important, and this is probably the most difficult thing for me because as I mentioned, I have the hereditary type, which is passed down from a relative. And once I found out I was diagnosed with this, I wanted to make sure that my sisters and my brothers uh, and my children knew exactly what this was, and to try to help them so that they can actually get tested, have genetic testing. Well, the problem I have is that this particular disease, to start off with, as I mentioned, you may have the mutation, but you may not have any signs or symptoms. So and my son is a prime example. He's healthy. He has no signs and symptoms. So naturally, he's not going to visit the doctor. He's not going to have the genetic test to see if he has this particular mutation. And I keep at him about it, but he puts off, puts off, puts off. I'm doing great. I feel great. Well, that's the biggest problem is getting people tested. And the most important thing is that you may not have a symptom of it, but you may pass it down to your child. So it's very important for you to be aware of this, so that although you may be walking around no pain, no carpal tunnel syndrome, no fatigue, but the mutation might also exist in your children. I've been very fortunate to a degree in that a great deal of my family members have been tested, and only one, my sister, found out that she was positive with the mutation, which is great. And now she's actually seeing a cardiologist, and she's on a management plan, and she's doing well right now. And she's actually they're making sure that they pay attention to signs and symptoms. Right now, she has no signs and symptoms, so she's fine. But they're constantly monitoring that to make sure that it doesn't develop into any type of serious condition.
Now, as we get ready to close, the management plan. Your sister
Hmm.
has one, you have one. Are
Yes.
they similar? Do they different? Like, help me out between the
Yeah.
male management plan right now and the female management plan, or you and your sister's management plan.
Yeah, I don't think and as I mentioned, I'm not a doctor, but I know a lot. I got a lot of information about it. I don't think it differentiate between men and women. I think for me, it attacked my heart. Uh, and for a lot of people, it goes to the heart, but it can reach nerves and tissues. And that's why every case is different. That's why the management plan has to be different. And you just have to know the symptoms. And because some people may not have carpal tunnel syndrome, but may have the sore knees and the swelling of the ankles. So you have to just pay attention and speak with your cardiologist on a weekly or daily basis. Make sure you're in good communication with them. Let them know exactly how you're feeling, what your symptoms are, so you can have a good management plan.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mhm.
Don Chaney.
I,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, doctor.
Ah, thank you. Thank you,
But that's
sir.
not it.
I got you. I
Thank you,
got you.
Lord.
Thank you for
You
your
know me. You
time.
know me.
That's right. Saturday, August 27th, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, hosted by Pfizer. You can attend virtually by registering at yourheartsmessage.com/Don. The event speaker will be cardiologist Dr. Don Rowe, and the community organization is Reach One, Teach One. People can find additional resources about ATTRCM at yourheartsmessage.com/Don. Thank you, Mr. Chaney. Any last words before we go, sir?
No, thank you. God bless you. And it was great seeing you again. And
Thank
thanks
you.
a
It's
lot.
great seeing
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Great seeing you. Well, yeah, I need y'all registering August the 27th for this event. Mr. Chaney, I will definitely be putting this on the radio and spreading it abroad,
Yeah.
especially in our churches. I wish I would have looked at my calendar. We actually have a convention going on that
Oh,
weekend, and we could have played this in lieu of the convention,
oh,
but the
okay, okay.
a little different. But I am
Yeah.
grateful always to connect with you. And hey, man, stay cool in Texas.
Thank you.
I'll be down there when it cools off. How about that?
Okay, I look forward to seeing you. Yeah, but this
Wonderful.
event is very important. It is so important and very informative, and you can learn a lot about this disease. And I think it will help a lot of people out there, and those who are being affected by it. Please, if you can tune in, please tune in because you get a lot of information.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hey, I'm gonna keep saying it,
I'll
Dr.
take
Don.
it.
You'll take it. Thank you, Pfizer, for this opportunity. Saturday, August 27th, 4 o'clock. Register people at yourheartsmessage.com/Don. Hey, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, everyone, be blessed.